Thank you so much, Edward. I'd like to take this time to thank Edward Epstein and the members of his congregation for allowing me to take this time to speak to you. I've had a long-standing relationship in the Jewish community, so I feel very comfortable talking with you. My history goes all the way back with Murray Freeman, who I knew very well, and I was a participant in Operation Understanding done by the American Federation of Jews. Also, one of my sons ran the Operation Understanding, taking young Blacks and young Jewish students to Israel and into Senegal. And my youngest son currently is the executive director of the American Jewish Federation of Los Angeles. He converted himself, along with because of his friends, when he's 12 years old, to take on the faith of Judaism. Charles Kahn, who you may or may not know, was a very dear friend and very supportive of all the initiatives that we did over the years of the 1950s and 60s. And just last Monday, I had an opportunity to talk to a number of Jewish women, a Jewish organization within the Federation. And so I have longstanding relationships. And when in fact, there seemed to be a parting of Blacks and Jews in the 1960s, I tried hard to be a convener and bridge support for keeping those relationships alive. And so today I want to talk to you about two things and seek your support. And I can tell you up front, and I'll reiterate it at the end. I need your support, one, in trying to help me do the anti-racism work that I continue to do. And it's in two forms. At the macro level, I'll talk to you about the Black Bottom, the neighborhood that I was raised in, and the University of Pennsylvania gentrified and removed 4,000 or 5,000 people. In that discussion, I'll try to make the case why the University of Pennsylvania, along with Drexel University, should pay reparations for what they did to 4,000, 5,000 people. The other part is at the end of last year, just before the beginning of last year, I was invited to be the keynote speaker before the University of Pennsylvania Medical Grand Rounds, and was populated by over 1,000, 1,500 people. And I talked about racism and the deconstruction of racism, and I used myself as a case study. And at the end of that talk, I called on the medical community to join me in the Palmer Foundation, which I set up in the 1950s, to fight against racism and bring it to an end. And I proposed that we gather signatures from people all over the country and outside the country, around the world, 14 years old and older, who would sign a petition asking that the United States government declare racism as a national public health crisis. And so those are the two pieces I'll talk. One is the micro, is my life experience. The other is the macro, which is the campaign, a national international campaign. And the support that you can give for that, if you choose, is one, to join the reparations fight with the University of Pennsylvania, where the gown turned the town into a desert. And the other is to support us and network with people, the faith-based folks in every denomination, to help us gather over 1 million signatures over the next 3 years from around the world to make the case for America being calling for a national public health crisis for racism in American society. Having said that, let's turn our attention to the micro. I was raised in the University of Pennsylvania, raised in the area of the lower end of West Philadelphia, surrounded by University of Pennsylvania today. That area was populated from 32nd Street on the east and 40th Street on the west, Lancaster Avenue on the north, and University Avenue on the south. There's a population that grew from the 1800s, the early 1800s. The property was, that area was bounded. It was called Hamilton Village, and was an Episcopal church that still to this day exists on Penn's campus, has been there ever since. University of Pennsylvania as a university did not come into the area until 1873. So you can see the length of time. The population that was in that area was largely Irish, Polish, German, and Blacks, faith of Jews, Catholics, Protestants made up the population. Sometime after the, I guess, the mid 1800s or so, what happened, it changed its name from Hamilton Village to Greenville. Greenville's boundaries were the ones that were solidified, the ones I just described to you. And the population of Blacks grew. Now, this is all happening before 1865, which is the end of the Civil War. Penn brought Blacks as slaves into Philadelphia, into Pennsylvania, in the early days when he visited in Penn and stayed in Pennsylvania and in Philadelphia. So Blacks have had a long-standing history, but it wouldn't be until really, I suspect, just before the turn of the century that the population was so large that the name of that area changed. It changed from Hamilton Village to Greenville, from Greenville to what was called the Black Bottom Tribe. And the reason I think we get its name because it's the bottom of West Philadelphia and it was largely inhabited by Blacks. And in my lifetime growing up there from the late 1930s, early 1940s, I lived at 3645 Market Street, right in the heart of what was Black Bottom. And its euphemistic name was called 36th Street. So 36th Street corner was where many young Blacks gathered for many, many years. The area was populated by working class and middle class Blacks. The housing stock, and Ever can show you some of the pictures that predated
Go ahead and
the
show
university
the
expansion.
Hold on a second.
Okay, so what happens is, as I remembered as a child growing up, 33rd Street, 32nd Street, I had the granary, it had businesses down in that area. This is Market Street. 34th Street had, from Market Street to Lancaster Avenue, had brownstones on one side and graystones on the other. We were self-employed in many cases, but we had jobs from many companies that were in. They were largely white companies. There was segregation, but there were whites that hired Blacks because the population was overwhelming. Like on Market Street and 35th Street, where the University of Pennsylvania Science Center was the Crown Laundry. Now that would not only provided jobs for our parents, it also provided jobs for us as young people. I've worked there after school, as many of my friends did. The Acme Market, which was on the south side of Market Street at 36th Street. CL Pressers, which was the hardware store, was right next to the Acme store. The Rubber Company on the corner of 36th and Market Street. Seal Test Ice Cream down around 32nd, 33rd Street. These were all flourishing businesses. It was a business district. Now, many of us who lived on Market Street and lived above the businesses, we were tenants, and we, for the most part, were not owners. But there was a lot of ownership on 36th Street. Once again, Barron's Drugstore on the corner, the west side, northwest side of Market Street. But from Barron's corner, from 36th and Market all the way out to Lancaster Avenue, brownstone houses on the east of the side of the street, graystones on the west side of the street. And I share this with you because it'll become important as this story unfolds. At 38th, 37th Street, the same thing replicated. 38th Street, the same thing. It becomes much more commercial after 38th Street, 39th up to 40th Street. But we had all kinds of small businesses that were dotted in between. For instance, like for many of us as young people and older people, we could go to the Fays and Fans Theater at 40th and Market Street, just beyond the Eureka. At the Eureka Theater, white people sat on one side of the aisles and Black people sat on the other side of the aisles. But the Fans offered us live entertainment, movies and entertainment and newsreels for 25 cents. It used to be 15 cents, then went to 25, then 50, later on $1. But that's when I got a chance to see Louis Armstrong, Nat King Cole, some of the names which are so legendary that exist today. Bill Jangles danced in Philadelphia, and so did Bill Bailey. And the folks who had businesses along those strips many times offered jobs to those of us who lived inside the community. Now, there was also the underground economy that took place, playing numbers and speakeasies and gambling, et cetera. But that took place in many places. And for Black folks who had to have an underground economy because they were participating in the predominant economy, were able to take advantage of it. And though whites and blacks lived sort of interspersed in the community, usually I would say to you, Ludlow Street to the south was largely white, but our school, our grammar school was at 38th and Woodland Avenue, right where the VA hospital sits today. The hospital of University of Pennsylvania and Presbyterian Hospital didn't allow us to come into those centers because of racism and also because of money and insurance. But the Philadelphia General Hospital was built to house and help 1,000 patients, largely the mentally infirm, the poor, and the indigent. And so that became our primary hospital. But our primary caretakers were in the neighborhood. Barron's Drugstore provided many medicines for Black folks who couldn't afford to go to the doctor and wasn't allowed to go into the predominant hospitals in the area. Next to Barron's Drugstore was the Titus Apothecary. That's where many times we were sent to get all kinds of medicines for our parents, our grandparents, and the youth in our community. We had a protection system inside of it. And even though our elementary school was to the north, around 38th and Lancaster, not far from Presbyterian Hospital and the Saunders home, which was segregated, we weren't allowed to go on those grounds. We had the Kendrick School, which will eventually change its name as in the 1960s, I think, to be called Drew School. When Blacks were pushing to get more recognition, Dr. Drew, of course, was famously known for his work in blood plasma. And so the idea that this was a community that was, for the most part, poor, impoverished, and totally without any bounds or boundaries is just fictional. University of Pennsylvania begins, my understanding, begins to push for expansion in the 1940s or so. By the 1950s, with the help of a couple of white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, Dick Dilworth and Joe Clark, the last white Anglo-Saxon Protestant mayors for the city of Philadelphia, they encouraged the university to try to stay in the area, even though the university had considered the possibility, I'm told, of going west all the way out to St. Joe's or going north into Mantua. Eventually, they decided to stay into this particular area. So one of the criteria, among others, is that you had to have an area that was blighted, and an area for the most part which could not was not sustainable because of its poverty. Well, Penn did not have that, so they really wouldn't qualify for the urban development. But what Penn did was develop a way to create the blight it needed in order to get the grant. And so what it did, it had a straw by West Philadelphia Corporation buying properties for the University of Pennsylvania, shepherding all through the community, unbeknownst to us that they were doing this. And so what they did was they let those properties stay idle. And as you know, as well as I know, that if you leave a property staying too long, what will happen is that the interior walls next to one another will start to fall or tilt. These properties became abandoned. There was no effort to fix them up or try to do anything for them. The architect of this ingenious plan in order to expand and create a gated community for the University of Pennsylvania was Ed Bacon. That's the movie actor Bacon's father. So he was really the major architect. Now, University of Pennsylvania will become really one of the first major universities to use this federal money like this. And we think of Penn as being the mother, the father of what eventually was called by Black people the Negro Removal Plan. And so consequently, that created a real impact and a real impasse for Black folks who lived in the neighborhood. I was an activist from the time in the 1950s fighting for trying to get recognition for Black history, pushing for Black history. I was an artist who painted and drew pictures of Blacks who try to and stand on street corners to extol the virtues of Blacks, et cetera. But eventually what the University of Pennsylvania did was created a wasteland. And the University of Pennsylvania, at this point in time in their history, talk about the fact that they've had such violent interaction with people who don't live in the community or don't live around Penn, but are from the community. Penn created, not only did they create the blight, but they also created the sort of opportunity for folks to come through what was at one point a fully thriving community and walk through a wasteland on the Penn's campus. And I tell folks all the time, if you check the crime statistics in the University of Pennsylvania from 1950 going back, you'll find it's almost non-existent. And so Penn creates what I consider this malaise, this destitution. And here's what happened to many of the Blacks. I operated some notes on it. For instance, like Blacks were pushed out of the Black bottom. So the properties were destroyed. They were forced into other neighborhoods which were crowded and overcrowded. So they were ghettoized. So it created more ghettos. The sanitation becomes an issue because now you've got more people, you have more access to paper, et cetera. They're pushed into desert islands, and they come from one where they've used to having people like Poppy Italian grocery store right on Market Street at 37th Street, Jake Goldstein's at Warren Street at 37th Street, who lived in the neighborhood. Arlen Specter. I told Arlen one time, I said, I remember you when you were a kid in your mother and father's store, grocery store, right next door to my Aunt B's at 37th and Cuthbert, across from the coffee factory. So the effort that I made over the past 30 years was to document this. Teaching at Penn, I was able to get my students in the Graduate School of Social Work, my students in the Africana Studies program, Urban Studies, et cetera, to record the life and the voices of people. We even did a stage play that we held in Annenberg Theater and brought out hundreds of people. And archiving all this material led me towards looking at how this disparity is created in other communities. And if you go to the website, theblackbottom.wordpress.com, you'll see how we chronicled Penn, Drexel, Temple, University of the Arts, University of the Sciences, St. Joe's, LaSalle. All of these universities use that same path for expanding into neighborhoods and displacing populations, mostly of middle class and working class people inside those communities. And I think that what happens is when you look at how it destroyed the history of the people, the culture, it destroyed the customs, the uses, the social mores of the people. It took away the kinship, the affection, the extended families, the support systems, the security, the faith, and it depressed people and it affected people in an adverse way, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And we think that we can make the case that the University of Pennsylvania, for the most part, has created a need for reparations to pay back. There are a lot of models that now exist. Harvard University just recently has to dedicate over $100 million towards fighting against slavery. It used slavery to help advance Harvard, but they weren't the only ones. I understand Princeton did a similar, Brown did a similar thing. We're using slaves for negotiating and advancing their economics. So Penn winds up getting an economic boon. It does land banking. It gets support from the city council, the mayor's office. It gets support from the governor and the state legislature. It gets support from the planning commission. So no, Penn by itself is not only, there are others complicit in this and have to be addressed. But other models now are taking a look at how this displacement is taking place. Georgetown University is looking at it. Germantown just recently put together, a number of the Quakers are putting together a system to allow Blacks to have grants up to $25,000 or more, loans, et cetera. They also look at redlining, how redlining in all these Black communities denied Blacks the opportunity to be able to compete and in this society, in this country. The California legislators just passed a bill for paying reparations in California. Michigan just passed a bill. Illinois just passed a bill. There are people exploring it in Rhode Island, and Detroit is actually acting out on this bill. And so there are others. And so my hope, our hope, is to use the Black bottom, the 3,500 to 4,000 people who were pushed out between 1950 and 1970 to make the case, and hopefully use this as a criteria going across the city. Because what has happened is, as you know, Philadelphia has spiked in terms of deplorable housing at this 400 years after slavery, is still mounting, creating a sort of modern day form of slavery. That'll be our push. In addition to that, concomitant with that, it has to come to an end. Racism in America has to come to an end. And therefore, I've called for this national, international petition drive, anyone 14 years old and older that can go into, that can participate by signing our petition. And we've gotten folks from, so far, England, Australia, Italy, Spain. I've got students in Africa. I've got students in the Middle East as well as in the Caribbean, et cetera. And so the people are on board. We just simply have to, we don't have the resources. We need to get the resources. We need to get the support systems to really help us do that. And I hope that your congregation will help lead the way, particularly help to organize many of the ministers, Black, Jewish, Catholic, et cetera, all the faith-based folks to support this effort. And I'll stop at that point and take some questions. Are you there?
Yep, thanks, Walter.
I wanted to show, Edward, I wanted to show them what it looks like today.
Yes, that was at the very beginning of the presentation. Hold on a second.
Okay, because I wanted them to see that.
Can you see the slides?
I can, and I may have missed that one. I had wanted it now.
This is the same view of Market Street.
Right.
Today, here's how it looked in 1964.
Right. And now what happens is these are not hotels, these are not dormitories. So there may be some here there, but these are large corporate buildings that have blighted this community and denied people access to their basic human rights.
Yeah, so why don't we go ahead with the questions? And people who are participating remotely, hold on a second. Let me just see if I can. If you want to, there aren't that many people, so I think if you want to just chime in, that would be fine.
Okay.
I have a question that was set to be read. This is from Lois. To what extent was the Science Center the real reason for raising the Black bottom versus a pretense put forth by the University of Pennsylvania Drexel to justify eminent domain?
Thanks for that question. That is a major question that came up. And in fact, it was so much so that a number of the students on Penn's campus, one in particular who reached out to me, Ira Harkavy, who is still there, because many of the students thought that it was a pretext, and they thought further than that. They thought that it was a CIA front operation, and they back in the late 60s, they started doing demonstrations and picketing. then I had them join me in the Black Bottom in fighting against, we had some white professors and a number of white students. And we were able to force them into the quadripartite agreement, a four-party agreement saying Penn should not be expanding in north or west like they had been without the consent and advise and consent of the community and the students and faculty. But what universities do, it's such betrayal. They get tax exempt breaks. They get a free pass because they're a university. They don't have real government controls, et cetera. They're tuition driven. They create programs many times that are really not as useful and functional as as they could be for these students, right? And students and their parents are unwittingly pulled into the notion that we're in a gated community, we're multicultural, we respect all groups and all people, et cetera. And at the same time, they're very dismissive of. I talked with Judith Rodin about how she should lead the fight, how she should have led the fight, but she was not up for the fight. But the Science Center was very much a part and parcel of this. And they were using eminent domain. They used eminent domain where folks didn't want to sell their properties. They had enough blight now for the state to say, to designate that we'll assign a price less than the value of the home, and you can take it for these purposes. And Penn made many promises. You'll be the right of first refusal, come back for housing. Well, they never built housing. They built corporate buildings. We'll help you move. We'll help pay costs here and there. There's one person, a dear friend, she's 102 years old now, and she says she will never forgive the University of Pennsylvania as long as she lives. She believes they killed her husband because when they had to move, they're forced to move, the unfamiliar surroundings, and they're trying to get together and try to reclaim, all that they lost. I tell folks all the time, if you're only looking at the brick and mortar and you're only looking at the finances, you're not looking at people. People are really the total sum of their experiences, their culture, their language. Well, I need to tell you, many of you are Jewish, that when you eradicate those intrinsic things, which are hard to place a value on, you eradicate a people.
And I just want to add to that. Yes, the creation of the Science Center was definitely a pretext. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that happened in my sort of transitional presentation.
I have a question. This is Rabbi Arilev. Thank you so much, Dr. Coleman. This is
You're welcome.
Long to know, and I really appreciate you sharing it. I'm wondering about the relationship between Penn's expansions and the Black Panther Party and the MOVE bombing, and if there was any sort of collaboration there as to if the MOVE bombing is thought to have been part of Penn's expansion, or if there's any connection there.
Did I hear you say Black Panther?
I said the Black Panther Party and the MOVE bombing.
And the MOVE?
Sorry, yeah, and specifically the MOVE bombing.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I was actively engaged in I was the chief negotiator for the confrontation of MOVE in 1978, which turned into a shootout. And I was almost killed. I was pinned down with crossfire in the middle of the street. I spent a year going back and forth in the compound, negotiating with MOVE and with Frank Rizzo through Hillel Levinson. And there was no, and the 1985 bombing, which I was also involved with, was largely a result of the 1978 shootout. And the founder, John Africa, was determined to make the city pay for what they did to his brothers and sisters. That's why that one took place. And they had no relationship with the Black Panthers, other than the fact that Delbert Africa, who I got to prove very fond of, he was in fact a member of the Black Panthers, but John Africa's philosophy was totally ideological, totally his, and there was no relationship with any of those. And I knew the Black Panthers. I mean, I trained, much of the work I did was training the activists from the 1950s on. For many of the folks you see who are elected officials, Curtis Jones and Vince Hughes and Dwight Evans, Congress. I trained all of them when they were younger to become activists, and eventually they turned it into politicians. I mean,
I guess I was asking Dr. Palmer if you think there's a connection between the 1985 move bombing and Penn's desire for further expansion.
oh, no, I don't think so. And I think that what happened is, like I said, John Africa took over his sister, Louise Africa's home, put her out, and he was going to take his last stand. What happened was, and I talked to Wilson Good, who I've worked with for years. Wilson told me privately, the fact is that Chief Sambor simply just went bananas, made decisions on his own, and the mayor and the council had no knowledge of what he was doing, and trying to convince the mayor that the satchel that they were going to drop on the roof of the house was a concussion bomb, just to make noise, blow out noise, and force him out of the building. When in fact, what had happened was they delivered what was the
C4.
bombing C4, right? And I said to him, Wilson, you know, you paid a bit of price. Our friendship, our personal friendship, fell apart because I had thought that he was responsible, right? And I talked to others who were in meetings with him the day before, leading up to, and the day of, and I said to him, you've got to write the record, because what I did was I called for a criminal investigation. I brought I brought a number of the, what I'm trying to think of his name at the same time I'm talking, but I brought a number of lawyers together, civil rights lawyers, and in my office, we fashioned out a writ of mandamus declaring that we wanted the bodies, and we charged murder. We charged Wilson Good, Leo Brooks, Sam Bohr, Richardson, the policeman, the fireman who refused to put out the fire. We charged them all with murder, and there was a commission forced out of that, and then Charles Bowser, who was a former deputy mayor, he and the commission eventually put culpability on the city.
Dr. Palmer, could you
Yes.
talk about the Black Bottom tribe as it exists today, and who the people are, where they are, and how reparations would affect them?
Right. And I think that what happens is, when I take a look at reparations from that standpoint, I'm looking at from 1950 to 1970 through the Census Bureau. We can identify, it seems to me, we should be able to identify all the folks who live within those communities. There are different people who live in different places. When they broke up the community, the people were dispersed all over the place. I went off to law school in 71. I came back in 74. In fact, I commuted back every week for 3 years. After having fought Penn for 2 years, literally physically resisting Penn, my team of people I had out there pushing down standing in front of the bulldozer. We all stood in front of the bulldozers and built trenches. So they were pushed into West Philadelphia, Southwest Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. Some left the city, right? So the whole thing is to identify those who lived there through the Census Bureau between that period of time, and try to identify them and their relatives and ancestors, et cetera. Today, it's hard to find them. Well, I created this in 1975, after law school. I created what was called the Black Bottom Unity Day. And in 1975, 76, we had almost 5,000 people from everywhere that came out the woods, and some people estimated up as far as 8,000 people. And we did that picnic every year for up until, it's still going on now, but it's really thinned out. And I went last year, and I told her this is probably my last time to come. And a lot of the elders that we used to have out there, they had stopped coming, and then others from other neighborhoods started coming. So that has not been a good barometer in terms of who comes and who doesn't, right? And I've been working very closely with one member, Sid Bowling, Gerald Bowling, who set up a group, the Black Bottom Tribe. And he has been sustained in terms of the emotional side and the fervor for what that community meant to him and his family and the families of others. I've tried to put together a group of the final elders, about a dozen or more people. Cora Hill, she's 102. John Wilson is over 90, 92, 93. Jerry Davis, about 85. Cora Hill's daughter, Mary, is about 80, 85. And Ike Davis is about 90 years old. I'll be 90 in 2 years. So I've been trying to get the people 85 years and older, just in commemoration for what we're doing, to see if somehow I can make a difference in their lives.
Thank you. Edward, I'm wondering if we need to move to.
Yeah, I think we should.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer.
Thank you, Dr. Palmer, and I really appreciate you.
Well, thank all of you. I appreciate all of you.
So I'm going to very quickly run through some transition to sort of bring it up to the townhomes and how the townhomes got to be and how the neighborhood came to the way it does. I'm going to share the screen again. Yes. Why don't I do that? Hold on a second. Have I done it?
You're sharing your screen.
Yeah, I'm not sharing my screen. Okay, super. This is how the neighborhood, this is how Market Street looked in 1964. This is how it looks today. So I'm going to sort of fast forward here through these slides. So Dr. Palmer alluded to the fact that city leaders labeled this area blight back in the 1940s and 50s. Martin Meyerson, who was at that time a city planning professor at Penn and later became the president of Penn, said the area is on the brink of blight. Only a vigorous program of redevelopment will prevent West Philadelphia from becoming a sea of residential slums with commercial and institutional islands. So they used this as a pretext to create the West Philadelphia Corporation in 1959 and get urban renewal funds from the federal government to demolish the areas around Market Street, especially between 34th Street and 38th Street. So all those areas today used to be residential and commercial neighborhoods like what you saw in the previous slides. And then this is what they look like in 1967. This is after the demolitions were completed. Okay, so 1967, but then now today, this is what that same area looks like. So how did that happen? So first of all, to understand why they labeled this area as quote unquote blight, let's compare the population changes between the Black Bottom and Mantua, two neighborhoods to the north of Penn, and Spruce Hill, the neighborhood to the west of Penn. You can see that the Black population is growing in the areas to the north of Penn, to the west, the white population stays relatively stable. So when the West Philadelphia Corporation was founded, and it was founded in response to a crime that was committed in the neighborhood. A Penn student was murdered. So the Penn administration said, well, what are we going to do about this? And the West Philadelphia Corporation had been proposed by Martin Meyerson in 1956. In 1959, they went ahead with it. And they talked about, as the sign of deterioration, the accelerated in-migration of non-academic lower income families. I'm going to take off my mask. People might be able to hear me better. So if you look at it from the map, right? The areas that are largely black are in green, the areas that are largely white in yellow. This is in 1959. Officials at Penn were worried that Powelton would also become largely black. So they decided, let's come up with some new use for this area between 34th and 38th Street that was the Black Bottom. And that new use was the Science Center. Now they also came up with the idea of intervening in the public schools. We want more of our people to live in this neighborhood. So let's do some things at the Lee School, at West Philadelphia High School, that will make those schools more appealing. And they would use federal urban renewal funds to accomplish this. So here's what the Black Bottom used to look like. Mostly small houses and businesses. This is what they proposed. A research center, science research center here, and University City High School, which would be a science magnet school here. That was the plan. There was resistance against the plan in 1963. Black Bottom residents staged a sit-in in the mayor's office, and they delayed the award of urban renewal funds for a few years. Then there was street protest in 1967, which Dr. Palmer alluded to. He was an organizer of that. And then in 1969, again, Dr. Palmer mentioned this, Penn students working with community activists staged a sit-in at the president's office. And as a result, the university created the Quadripartite Commission. One of the ideas that was put forth was that some of the land that was supposed to be used in the Science Center would be ceded to create affordable housing. And one of those parcels of land was the University City Townhomes. Here's a picture of the protests. Now, around 1970, things went downhill for the West Philadelphia Corporation. School interventions did not work. University City High School was a flop, and the Science Center failed to attract many international tenants. So a lot of the land that was cleared just became parking lots for 40 years. But then in the 1990s, again, in response to a murder of a student, President Judith Rodin started the West Philadelphia Initiatives, which largely took up the work of the West Philadelphia Corporation. They created a mortgage program for faculty and staff. They built the Sadie Alexander School, which you all know is one of the best schools in the state now. And new commercial development, Vienna Penn, Fresh Grocer, Acme, now Bridge Cinema, those pieces of land were all part of the Black Bottom Tract. They were cleared using urban renewal funds. So, and by way of being truthful here, my daughter went to the Penn Alexander School and I benefited from the mortgage program. Now, what we see in the area that used to be the Black Bottom, Drexel's UC Square plan, another school, the Science Leadership Academy Middle School, and the Powell School. And then market rate construction, office research, medical towers, no affordable housing. And you've all seen the construction that's going on over there. So that's what I have. And now I would like to turn it over to Darlene, Mel, and Chi-ming to talk about the townhomes. Yep.
Do you want us to- I was gonna say-
Actually, I was gonna, have them switch places.
So, I don't know how to do that. I can give you the YouTube link. Are you able to play it on?
Oh, you want to play the video? Yes,
Yeah.
yes, sure. Mhm.
I thought
Okay.
we could transition to, because there was a really wonderful protest block party rally on March 19th, and some of the students actually put together a short video to introduce who the townhomes are and what the campaign to save the townhomes is about. And we just played the video at our first community outdoor movie night on Friday on site in the courtyard at 40th and Market. So I thought we could share it with you so you can get a sense of what the community is. And it's, if you go to YouTube, there's a YouTube channel called Save the UC Townhomes.
Okay. Okay. Right.
Saving the town.
Oh, saving.
No, it should just be Save or Save UC Townhomes, so you know.
Okay.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah. Okay, let's try that.
I don't know how the search algorithm goes, but it's definitely there. I can also try UC Townhomes. Yeah, actually, we put
Protest
quotations
just out.
There it is. Like that.
Let's take that one.
I think you have to put quotes around UC Townhomes.
All right,
Because
let's
clearly it's
do that.
pulling up
Yeah.
older.
I also think it thinks UC is in the state of California.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
That's clear.
Well, let's see.
Here it is.
Yep. Okay.
Can the people online see the screen?
They will be.
They will be. Okay. Hold on a second. I'm going to pause.
But
I'm
you
gonna-
need to share it first.
I'm gonna do that. Yes, and I'm also going to. I'm trying my best. Thank you.
Edward, you're doing great.
Let's see. I need to share, and I need to share the sound and optimize for video.
Like that. You're golden.
Amazing.
All right, let's no sound.
Hit that little, yeah, that.
Seems to be on.
Muted something.
Okay.
Try it again, maybe we just give it a second.
Yeah.
We are getting sound on Zoom.
You're getting sound?
Yeah,
Oh.
remote people can hear.
Fix that again.
Okay. It's a joint effort.
I did last time. Yeah.
It's captioned.
Yeah. don't know. That actually is the extent of what I know how to do.
Okay.
It plays you that.
All right, let's try it again.
University bulldozed 2,700 households. We're out here to say not again, not in our name. Save the UC Townhomes. Save the UC Townhomes. Stop petrification. Stop petrification. Hey, hey, ho, ho, these developers have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, these developers have got to go.
So let's have the ancestors join us in this walk. I invite you to join me to see them standing around and with these residents before we move.
We are taking these streets. We are taking these streets. Whole street, our street. Whole street, our street. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Decentralized got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Decentralized got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Decentralized got to go. Shut it down. Shut it down. Shut it down. What do we want? What do we want? Now! Shut it down! Whose street? Our street! Whose street? Our street! Our street! Our street!
The landlord, Brett Altman, will make up to $100 million by selling this property to the highest bidder. What do we say?
Had they told us 10 years ago what they were going to do, we could have prepared.
That's right.
But we're not prepared. They just sprung this on us a year ago.
They have taken everything. They've taken our children's schools, they've taken the homes, they've taken Brewery Town. All of Philadelphia is being gentrified and people are being displaced.
The townhomes are the literal last sign of Black people in this so-called university city.
You can't get housing. You can't even buy a goddamn house in this community no more.
This is the black bottom. The University of Pennsylvania sits in the black bottom. I have never referred to this place as University City. Come on!
As long as we draw breath, we will protect this community, our families, and our children.
And also, we deserve respect. We are somebody, and we do matter.
Our demands are to stop the demolition, give us more time, make immediate repairs, and to provide just compensation.
Okay, I'm gonna let you guys.
So, I mean, since the 19th, we've been holding many.
I think you want to switch spots.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna just introduce.
Oh, wait, just so they can't see. And this is the microphone that's picking up sound, so you're aware.
Okay, so hi, everybody who's joining us on Zoom. Thanks for welcoming us into this space. I'm Chi-ming Yang. As Edward said, I'm a professor at Penn. And since that block party on the 19th, we've been holding many actions. You know, the tenants are getting organized. There's a tenant council and 2 of the council reps are here with us today. So I just want to welcome Miss Darlene to come speak a little bit, and then Mel's gonna give you a sense of the demands that we're fighting for. So come on up, Miss Darlene.
Can't see anything on your screen.
This keyboard will work better.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Darlene Foreman. I am one of 68 residents that live in UC Townhomes. I've lived here for 28 years. I'm also a veteran of the United States military. I served for 10 years. I have had the opportunity to raise 3 children here. They are all grown and moved out and doing well. We have women, children, elderly people, and disabled residents on this property. This is home to us. It has been a real hardship put on our lives since Altman informed us that we have to leave by July the 8th, 2022. We haven't even gotten our vouchers yet. Through much research, we have found out that there isn't any proper low-income housing available in Philadelphia. This is not fair to be pushed out of our homes. We should not have to be going through this. For this reason alone, it is mentally challenging for all of us. There should be a plan put in place for the residents at UC Townhomes and anyone else who's going through displacement. Living at University City Townhomes, we've had everything that we needed to support and raise our children. We have the doctors, the supermarket, SEPTA, schools, restaurants, and many other things that are needed to take care of ourselves and our families. I've been going to the same doctors for 20 years at Penn Medicine. 20 years, the same doctor. It's very degrading and disrespectful to treat human beings this way, to put profit before people. It's horrible. So we will continue to fight. Every entity that is connected to our situation, we going after them. They're our targets. And that's what we're going to continue to do. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having us. My name is Melvin. I'm also a 28-year resident of the University Townhouses. Before I read the list of demands off, as a young man and teenager, I moved around a lot. So I haven't really been what you call stable in one set community for very long. But the University Townhouse has been my stable community for more than half my life. 28 years and I'm only 44. So y'all do math. And like when you have a sense of community and bond with people of your neighborhood, y'all become family. And when that family is being taken from you or is attempted to be taken from you, it raises a lot of questions on the morality of people. And I was brought up in the sense where people of your community take care of each other. I was brought up with that sense of morality. And when somebody from the outside tries to strip that away, that's when we have to. It's our duty to fight for our family. And your community is your family, besides your blood. And my family is being attacked right now. This will not be tolerated by any of us. Our community, when our community and our families are being attacked, the only natural response is to fight against those who oppose our families and our communities. And that is why we are where we are right now. Until the wheels fall off, we will continue to fight the good fight, because I will not let my family be taken from me. Our family will not be taken from us. And this is damaging to the soul that people are this way, to know that people are this way. And there's a lot of them out there. And the best way we can fight back against them is to expose their true nature. They hide behind gimmicks and they hide behind their sense of good nature. We have to expose, it's our duty to expose who these people really are. And until we stop breathing, our community, we will fight to expose these developers, these politicians, and everybody of power that attacks low-income families and communities, because that's where all of this stems from. All of this stems from attacks on people of lower income, people they think that are not going to fight, people that think they don't have the resources to fight back. And yeah, and they thought their perception was that we was just going to take what they give us. Their perception was that we weren't going to give them a problem. Their perception was that we was just going to lay down. But our reality was that we could not lay down, and we will not lay down. And we will continue to fight this until y'all give in on a bended knee, because we will stand strong. We will continue to prioritize, organize, and galvanize the people of the community, of the Black Bottom, the townhomes, everybody of low and poor income, to fight against the powers of money. I'm just going to read off the list of demands that we have brought up and will continue to bring up until they are met, until we are where we need to be, where we should be. One of the slogans of our campaigns has been the world over: housing is our human right. All right. The University City Townhomes at 3900 Market Street, owned by Brett Altman, has provided low-income housing to more than 70 families for almost 40 years. Altman has announced a pending sale, mass eviction, and demolition of this property in July. Currently in Philadelphia, 1 in every 4 residents live in the property. There is no citywide plan for preserving low-income housing or constructing new low-income units that the bottom half of our city residents can afford. There are 1,700 low-income housing units expiring within the next 5 years alone. The city government and neighboring institutions such as Penn and Drexel have the power, resources, and responsibility to preserve this deeply affordable housing stock. UC Townhome residents, some who have been living in the complex for more than 30 years, are expected to leave by July 8th. We will not receive housing vouchers from HUD until as late as April.
And they're still not here.
And they're still not here.
Yeah.
And now they're talking end of the contract, July 8th. We will, this is not time to find replacement housing that would accept vouchers, especially in the midst of a pandemic. With the shortage of low-income housing in the city, many residents are disabled or have other barriers to finding housing, such as poor credit. Vouchers should be issued immediately. Many residents of the UC Townhomes have outstanding repairs to our units that have gone unaddressed for years. Unsafe and unsanitary conditions currently exist in common areas such as sewage leaks, rats, roaches, uncollected garbage, and no snow or ice clearance. There is currently no manager for the complex, nor there is a maintenance employee, and exterminator has stopped coming. Brett Altman is forcing residents to live in unsafe and unsanitary conditions in order to pressure us to leave so he can cash out on the land his family bought for $1 in 1982. And to speak further on this, now that we have applied some pressure to the Altman Corporation, they're starting to try to fix things up and try to make themselves, no, as long as you continue to put people over, profit over people, you cannot put yourself in a good light. And we are here to expose that. Many, given the history of the land being twice stolen, once from the indigenous people during colonialism, and once for the Black homeowners of the Black Bottom in 1968 through eminent domain, we demand financial compensation for all residents being forced from their homes. Brett Altman's family having received the land for $1 and benefited for 40 years of state and federal finance assistance in the form of tax credits and housing subsidies, now stands to sell the same land for up to $100 million. Thanks in part the city of Philadelphia's CMX4 zoning designation, as well as deliberate city planning goals made with the University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, and University District, this dollar amount reflects the current prices for the modest housing in University City. And just a couple more things I want to say about this and everything. We expect institutions of education like University of Penn and University of Drexel, and even all the other universities in the city. Y'all are supposed to be y'all are institutions of education. And one of the first formal institutions of education is about people. And the fact that these institutions, these large scale institutions, continue to displace and remove people from their homes and businesses to make themselves richer or to the betterment of others and not the people of those communities is a wrong that we are fighting to make right. Thank you.
So Edward also wanted, us to share some of the concrete things that Kol Tzedek could do. So I just wanted to highlight four asks that of the synagogue, and we so appreciate your community support. So the first one is to sign our petition. We have paper copies here, but we would ask that once we get our electronic version up, if you would share it with your social media networks. We would really appreciate that. And I just want to also highlight kind of update us about the history that Dr. Palmer and Edward laid out. And that is the very special relationship that exists between Altman Management, who is the owner and developer of the UC Townhomes, and the University of Pennsylvania. So Altman bought the parcel of land that is the UC Townhomes right now, right? 3900 to 3990 Market Street, under a housing and urban development contract, a HUD contract, because of the redevelopment authorities take over the land in the 60s using eminent domain. But what a lot of people don't realize is that there's a history of Frank Rizzo's racist housing discrimination that's directly connected to the building of the UC Townhomes. So before he became mayor, Frank Rizzo, of course, was the police chief of Philadelphia. And actually in the early 70s, Rizzo and the city of Philadelphia were sued by the federal government for their racist housing discrimination in South Philly. What happened was that the US government withheld tens of millions of federal dollars to the city of Philadelphia until it agreed to start building Section 8 housing. The UC Townhomes was the agreement that released that federal funding back to Philadelphia. All right. And even though the UC Business Association still tried to block this because they wanted it for commercial development, they tried to block it in court in 1980 and they lost. And this is why then Altman was able to acquire this parcel in 1982 and receive all of the federal funds and subsidies to build this. So the history is ongoing. And while we very much support the Black Bottom fight for reparations, I also want to underscore that this is harm that's being done to people right now, right now and right here. The other key point to make is that in 2002, Altman became the management for NPDF, the Neighborhood Preservation Development Fund, 20 properties, 400 units of housing in West Philly that Penn bought. Altman manages those buildings. They're all around here. One of the residents' demands too is if people are forced to leave and forced to move, why can't Altman offer to relocate people to one of his many other properties in the area? All right. It seems to make common sense, but he isn't doing that. The other thing to note is that Brett Altman is somebody who's known for building low-income housing around Philadelphia. But the problem with how this works is those HUD contracts are always set to expire. If a landlord opts out of the contracts, people then are displaced. They can cash out and often sell to these commercial developers. There's another Altman low-income property in South Philly that's set to expire in something like 5 to 7 years. Those people will be facing exactly what townhomes residents are facing now. Not to mention that Altman in October of 2021, he actually received 1,250,000 low-income housing tax credit award from the state of Pennsylvania to build another 40-unit senior low-income housing in Mantua. It's called the Triangle Senior Housing. Now, what's going to happen is he's opting out and displacing all these people at 40th and Market at the same time that he's being rewarded to build another housing unit in Mantua just blocks away, which will also be set to expire in another 20 years. So it's a rotating door, all right, of profiting from the low-income housing market. We are also saying the state and the city should not be rewarding developers and landlords who are opting out of their HUD contracts. It's completely unethical, though currently it's legal, all right? So we have to be very clear about the fact that it's legal does not mean that it's right, okay? Obviously, Brett Altman is somebody who donates tens of thousands of dollars to all of the politicians, including Jamie Gautier, Joe Sestak, Vincent Hughes, Kenyatta Johnson, Tom Wolfe, Dwight Evans, all the Democrats, right? He has donated over $10,000 to the Philadelphia Holocaust Museum. He's known for being what Ed Rendell said, quote, an integral part of the growth and redevelopment of Philadelphia. He donates to the ACLU, to the Fairmount Park Conservancy, right? This is somebody who presents himself as a very upstanding member of the Jewish community and of the Philadelphia community. But yet during COVID, he also took a $3.68 million COVID bailout forgivable loan from the government, and he applied 100% of it to his payroll. None of it went to rent relief for residents suffering during the pandemic, all right? I mentioned these facts so you get a sense of who we're fighting, because our second ask of you all would be whether you would be willing to write a letter on behalf of the residents echoing their demands to Altman, and to request what we've been asking for months, which is simply that he meet with his tenants to hear their demands and concerns. And he refuses to respond, no matter how many emails, visits to his office, et cetera, that we give. The most basic kind of dignity that you could afford is to meet with people to hear what their concerns are, right? The third ask we have is whether you all would want to coordinate an action against one of our main targets, either Altman and or the potential buyer of the townhomes who we've identified, National Real Estate Advisors. National Real Estate Development, the president, Daniel Killinger, they are the ones who are developing all of Market East right now at 11th and Ludlow. They're headquartered in Washington, DC. They also have massive luxury developments in LA, but he's basically recreating what he's done in Manhattan, in Soho, now in Center City, where he's clearing out all the poor people there to create these massive luxury high-rise residential mixed-use commercial buildings. And he's the one who's in negotiations with Altman to buy the UC Townhomes for $100 million. And the plans, as far as we have learned about them through reading Business Journal articles, will be to demolish the townhomes, to create massive skyscraper science labs mixed use with some residential units. Some of you may have heard about the current legislation that the Councilwoman Jamie Gautier proposed. Altman is suing the city because she proposed that the residents should have 1 extra year before they're displaced. She also proposed that anything a future developer builds should have a modicum of units of so-called affordable housing. But what we want to emphasize is, number one, this does not change the displacement for our current residents. And number two, what do people mean when they say affordable? All right, because the area median income for Philadelphia County is something like $94,000. If you do 40% of that, it comes to about $37,000 a year. That is much more than the lowest of our low income residents and neighbors make, right? So even if they were to win this lawsuit, it actually does not solve the problem at all. And we have to be very clear about that the politicians are not giving us the solutions that we need, which is why it's very important for us to apply pressure to the buyer and the seller. So I can give you all more information. Our website has all the information you might need. And if you would like to coordinate some kind of an action or protest, we would love for that to happen, because the more community voices and support, the better. The final ask would be, we need to put the pressure on and escalate toward this July 8th eviction deadline. So if we do have an escalation type of action the first week of June, for example, would you all commit to turn out to support that? So it's really those 4 things that we could really use your help with. And we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Priscilla, thank you. I have one very specific follow-up to sort of the asks. I feel like the ask around the petition, we can actually both sign and circulate it. And the ask around writing letters feels like a really yes. And the ask around, helping with turnout for something that you plan in June, absolutely. I'm curious about another leverage point that I'm wondering about, which is that we have a lot of Penn and Drexel employees at Kol Tzedek. And so I'm just wondering if you feel there is a specific, either that each of them writes individual letters, or is there some other specific way to leverage that power, either their voices or for them organizing the voices of their students. We have both, there's both Penn and Drexel doctors and professors. And there's no question that Kol Tzedek's presence is intricately tied to all of the development of University City and the displacement of the Black Bottom. So I'm just wondering if there is a specific ask, even more than us organizing an action, which we could also do. Is there any way that you can imagine that particular leverage being used?
Yeah, I mean, we have 4 main targets here, right? So there's Altman, there's Killinger and the buyer, there's the city, and there's the universities, Penn and Drexel. And for months, the students have been protesting to ask for a meeting with the interim president of Penn, Wendell Pritchett, to talk about what Penn can do and Penn's role. So he has agreed finally to meet. And it's actually very sad that it took months of protesting, including students disrupting a very large public event for the president just to agree to a meeting. But I do think that any Penn and Drexel employees who would like to be part of pressuring the universities to do their role and take responsibility for displacement that's been happening for decades. But clearly, especially when Penn is actually a business partner with Altman, who is a manager of Penn properties that many students live in, including there's another luxury apartment building called the Axis, which many students live in. It's over on Market and 36th. In fact, during COVID, that's not a dorm, but Altman agreed to let it be a quarantine space for a COVID isolation unit for Penn students. So he's letting Penn students come isolate in this building, but he's not providing his own tenants anywhere to go, or any of their families to go. So I think that could be a really great way if people have a specific Penn and Drexel. We can't forget about Drexel.
No, we have
Right.
a number of Drexel professors. I have 2
So-
follow-up questions that I see one hand online, which is, do you happen to know what his synagogue is?
Actually, that's a great question. We do not know.
Because I'm also thinking about the
Yeah.
potential of an action at his synagogue. It feels like if part of his perception is
Yeah.
his sort of morality and ethics, it feels like his synagogue community is probably a place where he's wanting to be well perceived. And I'm just wondering if there's some effective way to do some organizing.
He lives in is it Glenside? Is that yeah, I know. I don't know what his synagogue is, but if it would be great to know, because it's true that when you write letter after letter and there's no response, the only way to get people to listen is to have other people who are closer to them also express concern and put pressure on. So I think that's an excellent idea, and something, if you all are able to look into that, you would probably be able to find out easier than us. But I do know that he lives in Windmore Glenside. So probably the synagogue would be near there, I would think. I don't know if people drive very far away, but
That's enough information.
okay.
I mean, there's probably more than one Brett Halton in the Philadelphia area, but that seems like plenty of information.
Yeah.
There's a question from Sam Petty.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, I really appreciate the presentation and especially the resident council folks presenting. I'm wondering, just thinking of Jamie Gaudier as a target. She's been so involved in the slightly different flavor, but very similar displacement and promise of vouchers for the Market Street PHA property and also the Bartram's Garden property. And I'm wondering if there's like a unified front between all these residents that we're seeing kind of a mass displacement in the next couple of years, as well as over the course of the pandemic, we saw a couple like $7 million sales of voucher holding families, scattered site housing in West Philadelphia that are now no longer available to be used as voucher holders. It's private marketplaces where you might have used your voucher. So I'm wondering, is there like a group effort to kind of bring to the equitable development side of Gaudier's push that we can get involved in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the city is another target, right? And definitely Jamie Gautier is this, it's the same council person's district where one housing is being demolished and then the other one is being built, right? So I think more attention really needs to be brought to this because most of the media coverage is about how her bill is saving things. When you look at the details, as Mel was saying, when you start to look into the details and look closer, that's actually not the case. So I think that that's another excellent suggestion.
All she did was stall for time.
Stall for time.
She said
Yeah.
in my face, and I asked her, will you give us your full support? She told me yes. Turn around and get that.
Well, you know what?
She's also taken money from Brett Altman for her campaign. So, I mean, it's, yeah.
So let's do.
And this is what all politicians, they're gonna tell us what we want to hear, what they do, and you gotta remember, they're themselves, therefore their sake of I see it first before they actually before the people. They will tell us that they're for the people, but let's be perfectly honest. They want to make themselves look good first to the public because that they have to have that public perception that they're going to do good, and then they'll turn around and then they play both sides too. Because even in that position, you still have to be accountable towards the city as well as trying to be for the people, but you can't play both sides because the sides are against each other.
And there's no proposal where they build this new property, but everyone who lives in UC Townhomes actually gets to live.
Not currently.
No.
It's also not very practical that several years down the road with inflation and everything, that people who've been displaced would actually be able to come back in.
They have to have proper vouchers, section vouchers that would allow, and that's one of the biggest problems in Philadelphia. Is that
That's right.
massive, tens of thousands shortage of vouchers. I have to apologize. So I have to.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
I also have to go up on this question. Can I ask a quick question? For those on Zoom, I don't know if you can hear me. Okay. Hi, I'm Rachel Richmond. I'm curious as to whether this situation with how the developers and the city and the vouchers all work together, like, is that common to every US city? Or are there ways that the city could take on this property and own it themselves? Like,
Yes.
Could Penn donate this land
Yes.
to the city of Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia can find another
Yes.
manager?
Yes, they can, but they won't.
And it was an offer, it was supposed to be an offer made to the city to buy the land and to keep it affordable housing, but it was a deal that it was declined by the city.
Because they said they can't afford it.
They couldn't afford the $1 payment for.
Yeah, well,
They said they can't afford it, period.
it's a very important point you're making because the city has the power of eminent domain to do things for the public good. And while they often use it not for the public good to displace people, one of our asks is for the city to step in. They could exercise eminent domain. Penn could also help finance. There could be guarantees that whoever buys it keeps it 100% affordable. These are all within the power of the city and very wealthy universities like Penn that has a $20.5 billion endowment to do. So you're right on with that.
And
Yeah.
to keep moving with what you were speaking, what you meant, I also wanted to say too, that they also, like with the limited funds that Penn has, they could set up a one where the residents can actually buy the site themselves.
Yes.
And they have policies like that in places like Maine and Rhode Island where
DC.
Yeah, DC, and also in Connecticut and Rhode Island, where if a landowner wants to opt out of something like this, of affordable housing contracts, that the tenants can be the first to have the right to buy out before and if the tenants decide they don't want to buy out or they just want to go on and go to a different place or what have you, that then you can sell to whoever you want. But it's usually, but those policies are intended for the tenants to have the right to stay there and to buy the place for themselves.
Yes.
And that's a policy that's not currently in Pennsylvania.
Dr. Palmer mentioned that to the right of
Yes,
first
and
refusal. That's what it's called.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's something that also needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah.
It's something we're trying to address, and we're listening to address it as well, and going out actions and protests and everything. That like we really kind of break down the schematics of everything that's part of the problem of all of this.
I just want to add one more thing. Penn's going to have a new president in July, Liz McGill. And I think it's very important to make sure that she knows what's going on and she understands the history.
Mm-hmm.
I think the current president will be bringing that to her new establishment.
The current president, who, by the way, has roots in the Black Hawk,
Yes, we know.
is probably just going to want to slink off and not.
Well, we'll bring it to her doorstep too.
Yeah.
Somehow it will be brought to her attention. That will not go undone.
That's very important.
Not go undone. Yeah, I heard they were in the transitional period. Whoever takes that seat is gonna be hot as fire already. So we gonna bring that attention to whoever decides to put they behind in that chair. Like, no, there's a lot of heat that come with that seat.
So I think at this point we should bring it to a close because we're past the time, and I'm sure there are other questions.
There's a lot of messages in the chat.
A lot of messages in the chat.
People can write to us too. We're happy to.
Yeah. So can we have you put your email in the
Yeah.
chat?
Please. The email is saveuctownhomes@gmail.com.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the chat. And I think,
Save the chat also?
yes.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, save the chat.
And then,
We can stay in touch about, because I think some of these ideas are excellent about like a synagogue action. And that's something that would be really specific that you all could do.
He is not a member of the synagogue.
Okay.
I went on the directory to see if he was there. It's not. I guess if he's up there, Germantown Jewish Center or
yeah.
I doubt he's never.
No, or maybe, Beth Shalom or something like that.
Or Germantown Jewish Center.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We're gonna sign off the Zoom right now, because we can't hear you. Thank you, everybody. Stay tuned for more information from the KT for Black Lives Committee about further actions, information, literature, t-shirts, all kinds of stuff. There is a source sheet where you can read more, and we will be in touch with Chi-ming and Dr. Palmer and the residents and continue to ramp up KT's work on this project. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Was it info at,
SaveUCTownhomes@gmail.com.
no, say yeah.
No, the SaveUCTownhomes.
Like that?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, Darlene now and Chi-ming, thank you. Really appreciate it.
So much. It was really incredible to hear your stories from that out. I will surprise you. Yes. You're at your service.